Hello guys. So this is a revision session on village studies from your paper 2. So very important area. So first I presume that you have already completed the coaching and the syllabus and this particular topic at least, because here we won't be covering the topic as such. Rather, I'll be showing you what all things are important, what you might have left out or what you should not leave from this area. So everything we'll try to cover, but one or two lines is what I'm going to discuss to make sure that you will be touching upon all these areas. So consider this as only a revision session. And if you want the complete PDF of the actual classes where I take the complete session, you can check out the details in the description where you can get the PDF free of cost. Okay, so guys, if you see Indian villages have historically been at the heart of India's socio-cultural fabric. So if you need to understand India, you need to understand the Indian villages, right? So from ancient texts to modern sociological studies, villages have been portrayed as self-sufficient units, hierarchical societies, and microcosm of Indian civilization. So these you can write in your introduction on any question if it is asked on village studies, considered as self-sufficient unit. And we will discuss how the post-independent studies have challenged this notion. Here I'm talking about the historical understanding, even to an extent some modern sociological studies also. Okay, microcosm of Indian civilization. So hierarchical societies. And understanding Indian villages is very crucial for analyzing India's social structure, the interplay of caste and class, and the impact of modernization and globalization. So here we will be focusing on everything, and I'll try to touch everything which is actually required and the potential questions that you can get from village. Okay. So let's talk about the historical idea of Indian villages in ancient texts, right? So villages has been acknowledged since ancient times as foundation of socio-economic units of India. So if you see Vedic period, villages were categorized as urban settlements for elites, PUR, urban, which is urban settlement for elites, and then Gram, which is rural settlement for commoners, and then Van, that is tribal or forest areas. So PUR, poor, and then Gram, and then Van. So these three divisions you'll see during Vedic period. And these categorizations that indicate early recognition of a hierarchical and stratified society. Clear. And then, if you look at the Puranic text, there are, highlights, or it highlighted the potential hierarchies that is emphasizing the structured and interconnected nature of village. And if you look at Kautilya's Arthashastra, Kautilya described village as essential economic units that contributed to the state, through taxes. So that way, there are mention about villages and then leaders of villages. Gram, where, tasked with providing resources to urban rulers in exchange for protection. So these mentions were there in Kautilya's Arthashastra. And if you look at the medieval accounts of village, that means between 7th and 12th centuries, villages reflected diverse organizational patterns, like villages with single caste dominating, multi-caste village showcasing interdependence and integration, and then patterns of land ownership and occupation often dictated, in fact, the village structures. So we will be looking at all these, or in fact, you might have covered all these. So you should be having ideas already. Let's look at the colonial idea of Indian village. So from here is what more important for us from sociological perspective and from your exam perspective. So the other things that I just mentioned just for interest purpose, here onwards, it is very important. And especially post-independence. Even colonial idea is also not that much important because mostly it is Indology. Post-independence is even more important. They'll be asking you specific questions, S.C. Dubé's idea on village, M.N. Srinivas idea on village, like that you'll be getting specific questions post-independence. Okay, so Sir Henry Maine characterized Indian villages as self-sufficient little republic. Indian villages are little republics having everything that they want within themselves and almost independent of any foreign relation. So they are completely independent, whatever they want, they have, and it is self-sufficient. That's how they understood. And they argued that, while rulers and empires changed, but villages that remain static. So these are static and unchanging entities. Metcalfe and Munro, if you see, they again reinforce the narrative of village autonomy and resilience. And they viewed the villages as resistant to external influences and modernization. And B.H. Baden-Powell's ethnocentric view. If you see in the land system of British India, Baden-Powell portrayed Indian villages as backward and resistant to change. And the colonial portrayal, in fact, emphasized India's white man's burden, that's highlighting the perceived deficiencies in governance, hygiene, and progress. And they always highlighted that negative side because that the so-called white man's burden, right? They always wanted to highlight the negative sides of Indian villages. Again, there are the two different views during that point of time in Indology, the British administrators and the British scholars. So British administrators, they want to justify their rule in India and their administration in India. So they've always highlighted the negative aspect, the traditional aspect and the unchanging aspect and very orthodox nature of Indian village. But on the other side, the British scholars, in fact, highlighted the, a great, they have seen India's culture and everything with great honor and appreciation. So even within themselves also, there are different views. Now, what are the issues with the colonial perspective? See, the focus on harmony and wholeness is actually ignored over there. And they were talking about then internal conflicts and patterns of wealth distribution and inequality, the disruptive impact of colonial policies like the land alienation and famine, etc. So these areas ignored, internal conflicts, and then pattern of wealth distribution and inequality, the disruptive impact of colonial policies like land alienation, also this famines, and these perspectives often mask the socio-political complexities of rural life. Now, anti-colonial idea of Indian village. So, in fact, that criticize the the British idea, right? So, like scholars like O'Malley and Grigson, they highlighted vibrant village dynamics and focusing on power struggles and economic conflicts, and the role of caste and culture in fostering integration. So they highlighted these aspects, and this view, if you see, contrasted with the colonial portrayal of villages as stagnant and unchanging, right? So there are opposite view also. Now you can also talk about Karl Marx Asiatic mode of production. I discussed this in detail, in depth in the paper one. So Marx described Indian villages as resembling the primitive communism where labor and resources were shared. And he characterized British colonialism for dismantling India's autonomy and imposing exploitative systems. And the transformation of self-sufficient village into feudal and later capitalist structures. So that again will be reflected in A.R. Desai's understanding. We will be discussing that again. Now, what are the contemporary ideas of village? This is more important. You can get questions on Andre Bette's perspective. You can get question on B.R. Ambedkar critique. You can get questions on Gandhiji's vision, S.C. Dubé. So all these can, M.N. Srinivasan, all these can be asked as separate questions. Okay, so you need to prepare that separately, but I'll give you one liner here so that you won't miss these. So Andre Bette viewed villages as more than mere habitations, and they symbolized a core value of Indian civilization. And he emphasized studying villages to understand India's broader societal changes. Now, if you look at Gandhiji's vision, see, Gandhi envisioned villages as self-reliant republics, in fact, Gram Swaraj, and emphasizing simplicity and the community life. But he acknowledged the impracticality of realizing this vision in a modern industrialized India. So that is not going to be possible. That is again acknowledged. And what is B.R. Ambedkar critique? Guys, all these I'm expecting that you have covered. So I'm just mentioning this because this is a revision session. So you need to go through this in detail. And each of these can be a 10 marker. Ambedkar understanding, Gandhi's understanding, S.C. Dubé's understanding, Andre Bette's understanding, M.N. Srinivasan's concepts. All these I'll be discussing only in one line, but it can be a potential 10 marker, or even S.C. Dubé's and all can be asked as a 20 marker also. Okay. So Ambedkar characterized villages as, cesspools of degradation and inequality, perpetuating caste oppression and the economic exploitation. So go through that. We discussed this Ambedkar's perspective and everything in the chapter on caste in detail. Now, the general feature of Indian village, if you see, the key characteristics, you can use this framework. So just remember SUDIR, self-sufficiency, unity, diversity, identity, reciprocity. So self-sufficiency, that means, in fact, debunked by Andre Bette, as villages were economically dependent on external factors. So that myth has been broken about self-sufficiency. So the British understanding is mostly self-sufficiency, but there are discussions, there are studies, especially Andre Bette studies, how the villages are interconnected in different aspects, right? Village exogamy also practiced, and all those things you can mention. In terms of marriage also, interdependent. Unity, despite hierarchies, villages maintained a sense of collective identity. Then diversity. Villages exhibited internal and external cultural diversity as highlighted by S.C. Dubé. Identity. Village served as a primary source of identity, of course, and for all the village members. That's what M.N. Srinivasan highlighted. So you can mention about these thinkers, and you can write. So self-sufficiency has been debunked by Andre Bette, and diversity, you can talk about S.C. Dubé. Identity, you can talk about M. N. Srinivas. Reciprocity, W.H. Weiser. The Jajmani system exemplified the interdependence among the caste. So Sudhir framework, self-sufficiency, U unity, D diversity, identity, and reciprocity. These are the elements, these are the characteristics you can talk about, and thinkers also explain that. Okay, so now social organization. Our villages were often hierarchical, of course, and with caste at the primary axis of organization. Interdependence between the caste was both economic and ritualistic also. Economic in terms of, W.H. Weiser, you can mention the Jajmani system concept, okay? Now, social structure of villages. Here you will be asked on caste, class, land, gender, all these areas will be touched, okay? So let's talk about caste. Here, S.C. Dubé's study of Shamalpet village is what you need to talk about. Identified factors like religion, land ownership, wealth, and age as contributors to social stratification. Again, M. N. Srinivas highlighted the fluidity of caste through Sanskritization. We discussed this in detail. Sanskritization in itself was a different concept, where the lower caste is trying to, emulate the higher caste, practices to gain that social mobility. So he highlighted how the caste again can become an open system where mobility is possible, right? So the cultural mobility. Class and land. Talk about Oscar Lewis. Land ownership was a key determinant of social hierarchy in Rampur village. M. N. Srinivas, the twin hierarchies of caste and land ownership often overlapped. That is reinforcing inequality. So M. N. Srinivas is considering on one side caste-based inequality, at the same time land ownership-based inequality, and both overlap and reinforcing the inequalities. Gender, Adrian Mayer. Okay, the village, in fact, well served as a space for social interaction among women. So Adrian Mayer study. S.C. Dubé again on this topic observed clear division of labor based on gender, with women playing roles in domestic work, agriculture, and rituals. Then M. N. Srinivas highlighted the dominant male view, which perceived women as subordinate and controlled their sexuality. So guys, all these we have discussed. So go through the PDF that's there in the description. If you have not attended my course or any mentorship program, you can get that PDF and you can cover all these areas. One reading is enough, and you will get all these. Now, what are the challenges and criticisms? Louis Dumont you can use, A.R. Desai you can use, Dibankar Gupta you can use, right? So Louis Dumont criticized the overemphasis on caste and village studies, arguing they overshadowed the other dimensions of inequality. So overemphasis on caste. There are many other areas which actually ignored, right? And A.R. Desai, if you see, advocated studying urban centers to understand socio-economic genesis of rural exploitation. Dibankar Gupta, in fact, presented a brief view arguing that the villages were losing their socio-economic relevance due to urban migration and modernization. So Dibankar Gupta, okay, we discussed this in fact. So new dimensions in village studies. That's again very important. That can be a separate question in itself, that the emerging areas of study. What are the new areas of study? Impact of globalization on rural life. Guys, these are potential 10-mark questions. So you can prepare that. If question is asked on village studies, you can mention this as emerging areas, new dimensions, but these all can be separate 10 markers. So you need to be in a position to write, if you get a question, impact of globalization on rural life, gender dynamics and reproductive behavior, political participation and voting behavior. All these are 10 markers, but all these are new dimensions. Role of Panchayati Raj institutions in rural governance. Okay, now what are the methods and approaches in village studies? Mostly participant observation that enable the researchers to gain insight into the lived experiences of villages. They go there and they live with them and participate in activities and understand things. So that is a realistic, which is based on the ground reality. So participant observation. Approaches, if you see, M. N. Srinivas structural functionalism and A.R. Desai Marxian analysis, S.C. Dubé interdisciplinary approach, and Andre Bette Weberian approach. So we know all these. I have done a lot of discussions on this separately, so don't expect me to do that again. So now, how can you conclude this discussion? So this is all about villages. This is what you need to cover when the question is asked on village studies. And remember, there are hundreds of village studies. If they are asking you about, S.C. Dubé or M. N. Srinivas or Andre Bette, all these, what we discussed, these are common ones. That's what I have covered here. Apart from that, they can ask you any village studies. There are hundreds. If asked, just ignore it because everyone is the same. What you can do is you can make a broader understanding. Pre-independence villages were understood in this way. Post-independence villages were understood in this way. So you need to make if time and space is there, just make a broader, give a broader view of village studies. This is all what you can do. Don't go specific in that case if you don't know. Okay, because if they ask, then same was the case with everyone. But what you can do in that context is go broader instead of going specific. Because specific you don't know, but broad you know. Pre-independence, what was the idea? Post-independence, what is the idea of Indian village? Talk about that. Even talk about Metcalfe and Baden-Powell and everything. Pre-independence villages were like this. Post-independence, these are the studies and these are the approaches. These are the perspectives. Okay, so now Indian village offer a unique lens to study the intersection of caste, class, and gender. So early studies romanticize the village life, but the contemporary sociological research highlight the complexities of rural India, including the inequalities and the power dynamics. So by examining villages through diverse perspectives, as we discussed, a sociologist can better understand India's socio-cultural fabric and its ongoing transformation in the face of modernization and globalization. So that's the session. That's the session is all about. So I hope it helped you for a revision because the purpose is only for revision, not to cover the syllabus or topic. I hope that idea is very clear. And if that is the case, I think I have done justice to the time that you have spent here. And if you like the video, and if it helped you in any way, and if you think that your friend also get helped by watching the video, you can share it with them, your circle and community who are preparing in sociology. And in case if you want the complete course or mentorship on sociology or the test series if you want to take with me, get in touch with us. Check the details in the description. So see you in the next video. Thank you so much.